HBCU folks are going to be getting some assistance with health and sustainability by improving student outcomes in retention and graduation rates, expanding enrollment, and increasing capacity building with faculty and staff. Thurgood Marshall College Fund, the United Negro College Fund, and the Partnership for Education have joined forces to launch the HBCU Transformation Project. Joining us is Ed Smith-Lewis, Vice President of the UNCF Strategic Partnerships and Institutional Programs. All right, so glad to have you on the show, Ed. So exactly what is this, all right? Transformational Project, what are you transforming?
Well, first, Roland, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the Black Star Network for running this story. We are transforming outcomes for institutions. Ultimately, our goal is to increase the number of students that attend HBCUs, the number that are retained and persist and ultimately graduate. And our ultimate aspiration is that once we get those institutions functioning high with the students that they have, that we expand their enrollment to really ultimately disrupt poverty in low-income communities.
And so this project, first of all, how long is it? What does it actually entail?
It entails multiple different pieces. At present, Blue Meridian Partners, the funder behind this work, has provided an initial, and I say initial, investment of $60 million over the next 4 years to support 6 primary activities. Number one is that institutional improvement, really partnering with a set of HBCUs, both public and private, to improve their capacity to deliver against those aspirations of student success and career outcomes. Number two, that it's going to work closely with UNCF, Thurgood Marshall, as well as Partnership for Educational Advancement to build our capability to support these institutions for the long term to continue what is likely to be a long generational journey to get to that ultimate aspiration. The second piece is we're going to work aggressively, leveraging organizations like UNCF's Public Policy Unit as well as Thurgood Marshall's to amplify the need at the federal and state level for more public resources to HBCUs. Part 4, we're going to look to private philanthropy, private corporations to support these institutions in a fundamentally different way. On average, HBCUs receive 100 times less in annual funding from the federal government in the form of contracts as well as corporations, etc. We want to close some of that gap. The fifth piece is we're trying to work with institutions to really partner with their local community-based organizations and other economic development partners to galvanize a networked approach within the local space and place that these institutions occupy to transform outcomes. And then finally, we really want to reorient the narrative around what learning is and to push higher education to think about learning as an inclusive activity, whether as opposed to what it is today, mostly an exclusionary one.
I want to bring in my panel right now for them to ask you some questions. Michael Imhotep, you're first.
Well, thanks for coming on and sharing this information with us. And looking at your 6 interdependent sub-initiatives, I just wanted you to flesh out more and give more information about the 6th one, reorienting the narrative surrounding HBCUs toward their outsized impact on social and economic mobility outcomes. Can you give us some examples of what that 6th initiative is going to do?
Absolutely. If you know HBCUs or you've had a fortunate opportunity to attend one like myself, I'm a first-generation high school graduate that was fortunate enough to attend Morehouse College, and I have to say the experience was transformative and life-changing. At the end of the day, HBCUs represent just 3% of all higher ed institutions, enroll slightly less than 10% of all Black students in college, but produce nearly 20% of bachelor degrees in the Black community and 24% of bachelor degrees in the STEM field. More importantly, HBCUs also produce 40% of Black engineers, 40% of Black Congress members, 50% of lawyers and doctors, and 80% of Black judges. At the end of the day, we believe and we know that HBCUs punch above their weight. And what makes those outcomes even more fascinating is they do that with a 75% low-income student population and enroll about 60% first-generation students. UNCF released a report earlier this year on social mobility, and it showed that HBCUs are twice as likely to improve outcomes for low-income, first-generation Black students than their counterparts. And we're trying to decide, how can we change the narrative around this sort of less than moniker that HBCUs have been trying to shake since their founding, given those outcomes?
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
Kelly.
Hi. So it's kind of like a three-pronged question. Number one, how many HBCUs will be impacted by this initiative? Meaning, are these just going to be the HBCUs that are under UNCF or Thurgood Marshall College Fund? Secondly, I read here that there's been a $60 million investment or commitment rather already for this project. How much more money do you need and or have? And finally, in the same vein as how much money you already have, how long do you plan on keeping this initiative going? Is this a 5-year plan, 10-year plan in perpetuity, et cetera?
Appreciate the question. I'll first start with who we're trying to serve. We are starting with the two membership associations, Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which represents about 47 public HBCUs, as well as United Negro College Fund, which represents 37 private HBCUs. So at our core, we're looking at just over 80 HBCUs that we plan to directly support through this work, not only through direct grants, but shared services, as well as knowledge sharing and communities of practice that we think are critical to including HBCUs in this student success higher ed transformation conversation, where for the most part, HBCUs have been excluded from. So part one, we are starting with our membership associations, but our goal is to build models to expand. Within UNCF, we launched the team that I have the fortunate opportunity to lead today called the Institute for Capacity Building. The Institute for Capacity Building was founded by our current president and CEO, Dr. Michael Lomax, and its focus is on broadly HBCU and PBI, or predominantly Black institutions, improvement and transformation. So although we're starting with our core membership, our ideal goal is to develop a model that can scale to many other HBCUs, predominantly Black institutions, and other institutions enrolling high numbers of low-income first-generation students. So the aspiration is to disrupt all of higher ed back to that idea that we have to figure out how to be more inclusive in our learning environments as opposed to exclusive. To get to your second question on the resources, the short story is HBCUs have been historically and presently underfunded. When you add up the endowments of all HBCUs, it pales in comparison. Actually, it's 10 times less than Harvard University. I want to say that again. All HBCUs endowments combined are 10 times less than Harvard University. And when you start to talk about resources that are needed and you look at the rising costs in higher education, the rising cost in higher education is a product of the commoditization of the industry. And we are trying to figure out, how do we reverse that trend? HBCUs have historically charged left of tuition, or much less than their near peers. But at the end of the day, our first generation low income students are being saddled with debt. And so we know that in order to reverse that, we have to flood HBCUs with the capital that they've historically not had, and with the capital they need to catalyze that change. We believe that at present there's at least a $6 billion gap on endowments, a half $500 million gap in capacity. And once you start to unpack some of that, we think it's much, much more. So while this $60 million is an important catalyzing piece, the third and fourth point, really getting the federal government to move behind these institutions to amplify their impact, and getting the private philanthropy as well as corporations to pitch in, will be a necessary, because we're not closing just present day financial gaps, we're closing those historic ones as well. On the last piece, our North Star goal is that HBCUs become a sustainable system of institutions that are operating together. While Thurgood Marshall, UNCF, and our newest partner, Partnership for Educational Advancement, have a lot of the knowledge, resources, etc., to convene, galvanize, and provide new awareness, new capabilities into that system, our North Star is that these are thriving institutions working collectively together. And while we would love to be a partner for the long term, I think our job is to work ourselves out of business.
All right, then. Matt Manning, your question?
Very quick, and thank you for being here. I'm a Howard man, and I tell you that, one, because anybody who went to Howard has to tell you they went to Howard.
Yeah, no kidding.
And number two, because when this conversation comes up, I see it often on social media that there are often complaints about the disparity even among the HBCU contingent, meaning that some of your larger HBCUs have larger endowments and have fewer issues with sustainability. So my question is, for all our HBCU brother and sister that don't go to Howard, go to some other school, how are you going to ensure sustainability relative to their particular needs? What are the metrics internally to determine what Tougaloo needs or some other school as opposed to a school that may have a larger endowment?
Well, I appreciate Tougaloo, and as a Morehouse man, I support all HBCUs. I also had a fortunate opportunity to work at Howard University, so I appreciate you, brother. The reality is, if you're not Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta, FAMU, North Carolina A&T, Howard Hampton, you're sometimes not recognized for the value you add to your community. And that really gets to that number 5 piece on developing community and regional partnerships. We know that HBCUs like Rust College in Holly Springs, Mississippi, Voorhees College in Denmark, South Carolina, they are critical drivers of economic impact within their local communities. UNCF has released now 2 landmark reports showing the economic power of our institutions within their local communities, as well as their collective impact. We have made it a focus since the beginning of this grant to serve every single member of our 2 associations. That's 84 HBCUs. I dare most people to go past 10 to 12 HBCUs that they can rattle off, because our job is to get to those institutions that typically may not have the brand recognition or the awareness by the field. And that's where we think Thurgood Marshall as well as UNCF become critical intermediaries. We fundamentally understand the diversity of our institutional set, the disparity within our institutional set, and we are working actively to galvanize that community. When I say a system of HBCUs, we know fundamentally that while one HBCU is strong, all HBCUs are stronger. And so we have metrics both on how many dollars we're providing in those spaces and places, how many institutions we're touching, and then we're ultimately looking at impact across the HBCU space as a measure of our success, which means we can't just do it with the select few.
All right, then. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Good luck with the initiative. And as I will keep telling our people, let's keep going after that money.
Appreciate you, sir.
All right, thanks a lot. Folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on that.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share
who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
You dig?